Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. So we will proceed with the next chapter on designing effective learning strategies in occupational safety and health training. So this is the last part on designing of effective learning strategies chapter. So for this part we will look at on how are we going to design the instructional materials, yeah? So basically we will go an overview for what is instructional material is all about, and then how are we going to design not only engaging but it has to be an effective instructional materials for your OSH trainings, and what are the best practice when it comes to designing our research, our instructional materials. So as an overview, it plays a very important role for instructional materials to be prepared, which this kind of material is provide necessary information, resources, and tools to do for us to deliver knowledge and skills related to the workplace safety. So sample of instructional materials that normally used, yeah, in our trainings are handbook and manuals, which these written materials provide comprehensive informations for OSH topics, regulation, safety, procedures, and certain best practice or step-by-step instructions. And besides that, presentations and slides, notes are also used to deliver certain types of OSH training contents, which in this kind of materials, we often use to include key points, certain types of image, diagrams that could enhance a learner's understanding. Besides that, we also have the example of videos and animations. Videos and animations are very powerful instructional tools that usually demonstrate OSH concept and certain types of real life experience, how to correctly use PPE, and what are those step-by-step safety protocols. Okay, next one is the e-learning modules, which this is kind of an online learning course, okay, that allow learners to access the materials at their own pace, right? So this kind of modules normally we include videos and multimedias that promote engagement and longer retentions of learning activities. Besides that, case studies and scenarios are also considered as a part of instructional materials, with which case studies give us real life situations or workplace incident, for example, to engage learners on how they are going to apply their OSH knowledge and practical context. Next is the job aids and checklists. Job aids and checklists are also handy reference tools to provide quick essential safety information. Simulations of virtual reality, this will allow immersive learning experience that could relate or could replicate to the real world OSH scenarios, because some scenarios related to safety and health are dangerous, right, and or harmful. So if it can be replicated to a safer simulation, so it is can be used as a one type of instructional materials. Interactive online platform. So online platform designed for OSH training provide a centralized location for accessing various instructional materials. So this is the where we could see is a hub or is a platform which all type of content and information can be retrieved from here. Okay. Designing engaging and effective instructional materials for OSH trainings, it is important because we want to allow active participations. We always want to make sure that the informations are retained, and we also want at the end of the training course, the trainees, the workers can apply all kind of knowledge and procedures, skills of safety and health at the workplace can be applied effectively. So here are some of the key considerations that we need to um, highlight when we plan to design our instructional materials. First of all, you have to understand your learners. Start to understand their characteristics and their needs when it comes to learning. And then secondly, you need to have a set of clear learning objectives. So while having a clear learning objective, this will help us to have an organized structured and organized content and activities that can align with the desired learning outcome. So in other words, we also give our learners an idea what to expect throughout the training program. The use of visual and multimedia, usually we could incorporate this kind of materials because we understand and we believe so much the use of multimedia can enhance the engagement and comprehension of a certain information. So if you can use certain diagrams and images and visual, when we use it, certain complex information can be easily delivered instead of having a 1 hour lectures, or by simply use multimedia or certain type of graphic, we can deliver certain complex informations to the audience. We also need, when we design instructional materials, it has to be keep the content relevant and practical. In other words, um, we have to be focused when we provide certain content which the learners can use certain like just now, if you have a certain visual or certain practical or certain scenario that it makes content relatable, so it help learners to understand how this kind of information relates to their daily tasks on, and what are their responsibility towards safe working environment. Besides that, in designing in instructional material for OSH trainings, you need to also chunk the informations. Certain information we cannot even put in a one lump sum platform or materials of information. So it has to be in a bit size, it has to be step by step, it has to be, in a clear manner, and it has to be very organized. Like the example, the use on the subheadings, the use of checklist numbers, so that the content are organizedly, hierarchically, and our audience can follow our content, the training contents effectively and engaging enough for them to follow. Incorporate interactive elements, integrate interactive elements throughout the instructional materials. This is to engage the learners actively. Like we have interactive quizzes and knowledge checks. Provide opportunities for applications. Okay, so in other words, when we design our instructional materials, we need to ensure that we have certain numbers of activities or exercise to encourage learners to apply their knowledge to the real world situation. So for example, we provide case studies and simulations, we give some hazard identification practices. So these kind of application activities could allow reinforcers of the learning and also prepare learners for actual workplace scenarios. And when designing engaging if an effective instructional material for OSH trainings, we need to use clear and concise language. Write certain instructional materials in a very clear language, which you need to avoid certain jargons and technical terms that may be unfamiliar to the learners, right? And then includes job aids and reference materials. So this kind of materials is a supplement to the instructional material, which certain job aids and reference material that learners can easily and access, and a quick reference for them for day-to-day informations. Like we provide checklists, we provide certain type of infographic and pocket guides that summarize key safety procedures for the best practice. And when it comes to designing, engaging, and effective instructional materials for your OSH training, you need also to have the elements of seeking your feedback and for the literally iteratively improvements, which we continuously seek feedback from the learners and subject matters expert to improve our instructional materials. So use this feedback to make it iterative improvements and updates the enhance and the engagement as well as the effectiveness of the materials from time to time. So what are the best practice when it comes to design your instructional materials for OSH trainings? So in order for us, it is important to follow best practice to ensure the effectiveness and the engagements when preparing the instructional materials for the OSH trainings. So by following this kind of practices, you can design instructional material that effectively convey the OSH concepts. Not only that, but we also engage learners and promote knowledge retentions. And of course, at the end of the day, we want our trainees to apply this knowledge and skills at the workplace. So we need to tailor-make the materials to the specific needs of the audience and continually seek feedback to improve effectiveness of the training. So, here are the some best key practices to follow. You need to analyze from time to time your training needs analysis, like conduct the thorough need assessment to identify what are the specific OSH training needs for the target audience. Like consider the job roles and tasks and what are the changes happen from time to time. And then we also need to have a clear learning objective, which is it is clearly defined and desired learning outcomes and objectives for the training. For example, we ensure that all objective should be specific, and it also promotes measurements. So this kind of learning objectives will guide you to design and development of instructional materials. As I mentioned earlier, that when it comes to the training need assessment, when it comes to the designing of your instructional materials, you need to also understand your target audience. Like you need to get an understanding about the target audience. For example, their level of knowledge and experience, as well as their learning style. So we can tailor the content and language according to the level. For example, if you have a top management group of people to attend your OSH trainings, you may need to avoid certain jargon, certain terms that is doesn't belongs to them to understand. For example, you may need to avoid certain topics or certain materials that looks not suitable for them. It's not appropriate for them to take a look. Use a visual and multimedia. We need also to incorporate relevant visuals such as diagrams and charts. So the use of multimedia elements like videos and animations or interactive simulation is to eventually to engage learners and provide real life context. And we also need to organize content effectively, like structure the materials in logical and coherent manner, like the usage of subheadings, certain points to break down the information into certain chunks, numbers of information. Next is to provide practical example. Yes, when it comes to real life examples and case study, it is very important to illustrate OSH concepts and the application in the workplace. So relate the content to the learners towards the specific job roles and responsibilities, so that this can increase the certain relevancy and practicality among your trainee. Um, Next is to emphasize active learning, which encourage active learning among the participant through some group discussion or hands-on or interactive activities that can promote engage learners and promote critical thinking. Incorporate knowledge checks, like include the knowledge checks, quizzes, or self-assessment activities throughout the instructional materials. How are we going to determine instructional sequence? So what is instructional sequence, the importance of effective instructional sequence, and the techniques for us to determine an optimal instructional sequence for OSH trainings. So as an overview, instructional sequence for OSH trainings is actually you are following a logical progression to ensure learners have developed a comprehensive understanding toward any safety principles and practices. So it says introductions and orientation. The training program begins with the orientations of to OSH concepts and the purpose of trainings, the importance of safety at workplace, all the kind of legal requirements, and the role of OSH management system and hazard identification and risk assessment. This allow learners to introduce to the process of hazard identification and risk assessment, which learners learn how to recognize, to understand to be aware what are those their workplace hazard and how can they assess the severity and the likelihood and how can they prioritize certain level of risk. So these sections may include information on common hazards such as do they exposed to the chemical hazard? Is there any physical hazards around them, or are they performing any jobs that allowing certain risk of ergonomic hazard? Safety policies and procedures. Learners are familiarized with the safety policies. This includes some emergency procedures, safe work practices, and the usage of PPE. Safety training and communications. Training that focus on effective safety communications and importance of the training employee on safety-related topics. An overview of instructional sequence. So it's a worksite analysis and control. Learners should explore methods for analyzing worksite and implementing hazard controls. Incident investigations and reporting, which training address the process of investigating incidents and near misses and understanding the root causes and how can they implement corrective actions. So learners can learn how to document incidents, how to analyze certain trends, and how can they prevent and they provide a thorough, effective incident reporting and investigation. Ergonomic and injury prevention. This kind of section focus on ergonomic principle, which involve optimizing work environment to reduce the risk of musculoskeletal disorders and injuries. Health hazard and communication. Training covers the importance of health protections and effective communication of health related hazards. So learners can explore topics such as do they been exposed to monitoring, occupational disease, chemical safety data sheet, and the proper law of labeling and handling of the hazardous substance. Safety, leadership, and culture. So this section emphasizes the role of leadership in promoting safety culture within the organization. So the learners, they learn how to the quality of effective safety leaders, strategies for motivating employees, and how can they fostering a positive safety culture in the workplace. Okay, why is it so important to have an effective instructional sequence? So first of all, it enhances the learning. Why it enhances learning? Through a well-structured instructional sequence facilitates effective learning by presenting the information in logical and organized manner. Maximize engagement, supports retention and transfer, builds a solid foundation among the learners, and then reduce cognitive load. Okay, as you understand, more our audience are adult learners, so an instructional sequence that is carefully organized and structured helps to reduce cognitive loads among learners. So by presenting information in logical sequence, learners can better process and integrate new information without they been feeling overwhelming. So this will allow them to focus on certain level of cognitive resources and understanding to apply content rather than they struggling to disorganize and confusing information. Facilitates differentiations. An effective instructional sequence can accommodate to a diverse needs of a learner style. Okay, so as we can see, learners have various kind of learning styles. So when we have an organized and effective instructional sequence, we could accommodate to uh, diverse flavor and and diverse and various needs of our learners. Besides that, it also improves assessment and evaluation. A well-planned instructional sequence enables more accurate, meaningful assessment for the learners to assess whether they understand knowledge and skill that they've learned. So we by aligning assessment with the instructional materials, trainers can use these materials to gauge a learner's progress and identify whether they require certain additional supports or not. So this feedback loop allows for ongoing evaluation and refinement of the instructional sequence. So in summary, an effective instructional sequence is vital for promoting effective learning, retention of the knowledge and transfer of the knowledge, and also develop a strong foundation among the audience. So by carefully design and sequence instructional content, trainers can create an optimal learning experience and maximize learners' understandings towards the content of safety and health trainings. So what are those techniques that we could apply when we want to determine and to the optimal instructional sequence for OSH trainings? So determining the optimal instructional sequence for OSH trainings involve careful considerations on of course, again, the learning objective, the target audience, and specific content that we want to be covered. We want to deliver to to the trainings audience. While there is no one size fits all for all approach, so this is some of the techniques. Need assessment, okay, a thorough need assessments for us to identify specific OSH knowledge and skills, and their learning objective, a clear learning objective, specify what learners should be able to do after they complete the trainings. Techniques for determining optimal instructional content sequence for OSH trainings are the content analysis. We need to follow Bloom's taxonomy. As I mentioned earlier, Bloom's taxonomy always start with no, right? With the level with no. So um, it's a hierarchical framework that categorizes learning objective into different level of cognitive complexity, and it's normally start with a low level objective such as knowledge and comprehension before we can progress to the higher level of learning activities. Conceptual orders, skill development, and also engage learners. So we need to consider learners' preference and engagement by incorporating interactive elements such as the usage of simulations, group discussion activities, and practical exercises. Feedback and assessment, adaptation and flexibility, and of course, last but not least, is on the pilot testing. So before we implement any OS training program on a larger scale, conduct your pilot testing to represent sample of learners. So you need to gather certain amount of feedback from the participant and trainers to refine the instructional sequence and improve the effectiveness of the training. So by considering these techniques, you can tailoring the instructional sequence to the specific needs of the learners and content, and you can determine an optimal sequence for OS training that enhance learning outcomes and promotes a safer work environment. So this is the class activity. Okay, you need to work in a small group to develop a sample content outline and set of a written performance objective for an OS training program. That is your class activity task 1. Task 2, content outline, performance objective, and discuss the reason why you made certain design of choices. All right, and class activity task 3, as the class compare and contrast the different approaches and discuss best practice in designing effective learning strategies for OS training, that you must ensure all attributes of learning strategies should be taken care of, okay, when you design and develop your training plan for OSH trainings, your training plans. So that's all for today. So these activities are all the 3 tasks you should be able to complete by in 2 weeks time, and I'll see you later with the next chapter. See you soon. Thank you.